Welcome to our latest episode of Coaching Outdoors. I hope you are well listening in, whatever you may be doing and whatever time it is where you are. Today we are heading over to America. It's always a delight to reach beyond the UK and Europe and find some coaches who are working in the outdoors on the other side of the world. So Jen, thank you so much for taking your time to join us today, and in advance for sharing your journey, your knowledge, your insights. And if you're able to just introduce yourself super briefly, we've got plenty of time to dive in later.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for having me. I feel so honored and privileged to be here speaking with you. And I'm just delighted that you reached out. So thank you. I consider myself a light worker who believes in cultivating a reciprocal healing relationship with nature. And so, nature heals us, we heal nature. I'm certified in a variety of modalities for both coaching and energy healing. And as I accumulated these different modalities, I started to integrate them together into a practice to support my clients across multiple layers and levels. I call it the PECSS coaching framework, which is physical, emotional, conscious, subconscious, and spiritual levels. And then after that, it just led me to create the Institute for Nature-Centered Coaching.
Wow, it's amazing. That's wonderful. Well, it's just a pleasure to have you join us today, Jen. And I'm really looking forward to already diving into some of that amazing just intro. And I'm sure our listeners and watchers will be equally keen to get into that. But we're going to first take you and ask you to go right back into a question we ask all of our guests, and it just helps to take you back to that childhood, really. And so the question is, what's your earliest memory of being outdoors, and why do you enjoy being outdoors so much?
My earliest memory is probably at my grandmother's house out in the yard, chasing her cat through the bushes. But I think when I think of my childhood, I think most frequently of climbing trees. There were certain trees in this park across the street from the house where I'd climb up and I'd try to get from one tree to the next tree to the next tree from the upper branches, almost like a squirrel would.
Amazing. I love it.
Yes. And as for the why, it just feels like home. I feel more connected. I feel more present. I feel more at peace than I do indoors. So it just feels natural.
And that memory as well, it's always such a beautiful way to kind of start back. We've had plenty of dogs. I think it's the first time we've had a cat, I have to say. So that's always good. Our four-legged companions on this planet and what influence they've had on our lives. And you're clearly kind of going from being that child into where you are now, and working as a coach, and going through your bio, you've got a number of qualifications in so many kind of different areas as well. It would be just interesting to kind of trace that journey of, so becoming a coach and so being in surplus with clients, and then placing nature at the center of your practice. Like, what was the inspiration behind that?
Mm-hmm. I feel like I've always had a connection to nature. It's always been where I've gone to find answers when I didn't have a clear path forward, well before I ever had coaching tools or any actual practices that are more formalized. It was just how I centered myself, balanced myself, came back to myself, especially, with anxiety. And I had some trauma early on. And as I sought out modalities to heal that, I realized how expansive and freeing it can be to do that healing work. And so as I sought my own healing, that's when I said, oh my gosh, I want to share this with everybody. This is amazing. And so I dive into one and I train in it, and then I dive into another and train in it. And so I think it's just more following my fascination and my curiosity, experiencing the power of them personally, and then sharing that with others, that was a natural progression. So I began in corporate, much like Paul did.
Yep.
And so I did corporate marketing and communications for 17 years and kind of stumbled into the tools and told my husband, well, I want to pursue this path. It was a complete 180 from what I'd been doing. And yet it felt like the most natural thing to do. And as soon as I stepped into that role and really owned it, I can't imagine going back. It's one of the most powerful decisions and one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Well, Jen, that's so lovely for you to share that with our listeners and stuff. And because the power of that is that the story of, so many people will identify with that and give, maybe even we have some listeners who are considering, they might be close to thinking, oh, how do I do a 180? And I really want to do this. And so I think it's really powerful to have people, guests like yourself coming on and just how you stepped into that space and you just did it and almost own. I love that saying you said, I owned it. And it's interesting, isn't it? That when we own something and we actually be that person, that suddenly it all just makes sense and it comes together. And I saw that the light in your face just lit up as you almost, I could see you owning it, as you say. And that was just fantastic. And I think that, something I would encourage our listeners to really listen and understand that. So moving that on, we see that for you, so as the person, the individual, could you just, how that story then leads towards the institute that, for nature-centered coaching that you've created and you're the founder, and how that just talk us through into that journey?
Sure. I started with the traditional coaching models around thought work and emotional processing, and realized that people are more complicated than that, and that we store things energetically in our body, physically. I started to understand the mind-body connection and how our bodies really truly support us, even through illness and chronic pain. It's our body communicating that we need to make a change or a shift. And so as I started to pursue different modalities and put them together, what I realized is there was no one institute or schooling that really took that holistic, comprehensive view of how to help people through a healing process. And so as I started to pull together the different modalities for my own clients, I realized that there was a need out there to fill for those who are seeking to have enough of a toolkit to help their clients. And so as I started to imagine what would it be that I would look for in a program if I were to do this whole process over again, what would I put together? And I just dreamed big and I wrote everything down. And the next thing you know, I had an 11-month curriculum on my hands, and I only knew how to teach about 14 of the 45 classes. But what I realized was, in my connections, in my network of those that I had met throughout the process, I could find somebody who was an expert in each one of those areas to fill in as a teacher. So it started as an idea where I reached out to my friends and colleagues and said, so I've got this idea. Everything would be, rooted in nature. That's going to be the foundation of everything. It'll be connecting to plants, to animals, to the elements, the seasons. And what do you think about teaching? Everyone got so excited. And then I actually had to pull the trigger, which was very scary. And, I started to second guess myself. And that day I happened to take my dog for a walk, and I came back and I noticed that a bird had hit my window and was lying on the ground. So I brought the dog inside, came back out with a shoebox and some tissue in it. The bird let me pick it up. I put it into the box. I brought the box into my office. I flowed some Reiki, and I hopped on a little chat room with a group of animal communicators and said, hey, here's this bird. What does it need? Should I take it somewhere? And then I just kind of went about my work, and the bird just kind of hung out in the box. About 20 minutes later, it flew onto my arm and then started flying around my office. So I opened the window, it flew out the window, and I logged back into that same group to, I didn't want anybody to have to do any unnecessary work. And somebody had responded and said, well, I tuned into the bird and they have a message for you. That big thing that you're really scared to do, you need to take the leap and fly. And so at that point, I needed that message from nature to really push me into executing on it. And then it, took another year to build, and then we launched, and we've been flying ever since.
Oh, just got total goosebumps there when you were describing that story.
Yeah.
And it's those idiosyncrasies, those energetic connections, like beyond the human consciousness that we don't really understand, so we maybe dismiss, but actually there's so much that goes on beyond our intelligence, inverted commas. And stepping into that is phenomenal, really going and owning it. But it's also, for me, what really came through was this collaboration, and I think within the coaching community, the collaboration between people is so important. And actually, together we are many, and we can do so much. And it's actually admitting, going, okay, well, actually, I don't really know much about that, and I know who is so much better. Let's invite them in, and it's that ripple effect across an entire network. But you're the enabler at the heart of it. You're the creator and the pulling everything together. And this 11-month program, it would be amazing to find out a little bit more, like what is the coachee experience as they kind of move through this. There seems to be so many different strands. It would be great just to hear a little bit more.
Sure. With the way we have it structured is we spend the first 3 months really building up the coach themselves and helping them tap into their original medicine. What makes them unique? How can they start to integrate their own life experiences and how they feel they bring their own medicine to the world, and then giving them the foundational tools to set them up for success. So how do you ground and clear your energy? How do you hold space for somebody? How do you stay out of somebody else's business? So the first 3 months is really setting them up for building their practice. And then each series we have of modalities are within the physical. So here's some tools for physical and emotional clearing. Here's some tools for emotional and conscious clearing. Here's some tools for subconscious clearing and spiritual clearing. And so we take that same PECSS model that I'd mentioned before, and we give them a bunch of tools in each one of those categories so that they can have this buffet and take what serves and what works for them and leave the rest, so that they can start to say, okay, here's this variety that I am learning. Now let me try to create a practice that's unique to me, tied to my own original medicine. So I'll give you an example of some of the classes. It's working with plants and their various healing properties, both from physical healing of symptoms to emotional processing and clearing some of the emotional stuff from the body. We've got forest bathing. I don't know if you're familiar with morning altars and Day Schildkretz's work, but it's essentially creating an earth mandala with nature materials. And that then is a foundation for opening up different questions. Where are you finding resistance? So I'm not creative, or it has to be perfect, where we start to identify where those conditions and rules that they've set up for themselves that are holding themselves back, that are blocks. Or even at the very end, when the mandala's created, it's not permanent. What do you think about the impermanence of that? And how is that reflected in your life? We have working with the elements, lunar cycles, seasonal energies. How do we work with the natural cycles and rhythms that people go through as well as nature goes through to support ourselves? And also, how do we allow there to be the cycles and the rhythms without pushing against when it's time to rest or when it's time to start taking action? We teach about the major and the minor energy centers in the body and how those play a role in how we can use energy healing modalities, such as breath work, Peter Levine's work, shaking, a Hawaiian practice called ho'ololoa. We have classes on animals and plants as messengers, which is really more tapping into the subconscious and recognizing that our logical reasoning side of the brain processes 40 bits of information per second, but our sight, sound, taste, touch, smell processes 11 million bits of information per second. So our body is much wiser. And that's why we have the saying, trust your gut, but we don't have language to support that. So we use an external symbology of animals and plants and what we know about it in our relationship with that to tap into the subconscious messages that maybe we've been cycling in our logical reasoning mind for And then we have more of the traditional coaching classes like thought work, Byron Katie's thought work, and doing thought inquiry. And then the mind-body connection tools that I kind of alluded to before. So it's a mouthful, but it gives you a taste of what we do and what we teach.
That's incredible. I could hardly write quick enough just to. I was where do we? Gosh, the listeners, where do we go with that? The Hawaiian one. I'm intrigued. Could you share a little more of that? That's not something maybe our listeners haven't come across. What, a little bit more on that, Jenn?
Sure. So Ho'ololoa was actually designed by one of our teachers, Anela, and she is 14 generations Hawaiian. And so she can trace that all the way back through her lineage, including to royalty. She had an awakening moment, and it is a part of that process. She got a download of a way of going about helping people heal. And so it works off of the 12 energy centers, what most people refer to as the tree of life energy centers in the body. And it goes down into the cellular and DNA level. And so it's accessing at the DNA level to clear ancestral trauma, to activate your blueprint for this lifetime, and to heal really at the cellular level, going deep into the organs, into the endocrine system, your T cells, your B cells, your skeletal structure. So it's an energy healing modality, but really, really deep in the body.
It's amazing. Gosh, it's and I mean, and certainly, we've had guests, and we talk a lot about seasonal cyclical and becoming very embodied with nature. And so we certainly talk, and we've had guests, and it's lovely to hear you're taking that to another level around, not just using our one sense, or we're in nature, but we're part of nature. Nature is within us. We're embodiment of it. And just that whole being able to use all of your senses when you're in nature, your hearing, your touch, your senses, your eyesight, all of those things. And it seems as though the program is just so extensive in drawing. And I like this buffet idea that you get to a point where you're able to, as you say, learn the basics of holding space and what your own needs are. But then I love this fact that you can then go and choose from a whole plethora of choice. That's amazing. And gosh, how rich is that to be a student, to be able to access and have some learning and teaching from that, which is just fabulous. And I moving that on, I mean, are you able just to share some of those stories, respecting confidentiality, but just share some stories of students that have been through your program and perhaps where they are now, and perhaps some stories of how that's been for them, and what's it like on the other side of having gone through this amazing program?
Sure. One student that comes to mind had already been an executive coach for about 15 years. And what she realized, especially during COVID and the pandemic, was that people were really hungry for connection. They were feeling very disconnected, and this revitalizing of our connection to nature with having to go outdoors, and also missing that being outside their home from quarantine, that connection, and really truly appreciating that. And so she sought out the program because she wanted to find a way to start to introduce that to her executive clients, that's not necessarily a part of how the traditional curriculum would be in that vein of coaching. Mm. And so she came to us to want to learn that, and she started to use some of it with her clients, and she thought that she would get a lot of resistance going into it, but she'd say, I've just got this idea, maybe we should do blah, 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 blah. And they really, really received it well. And she started to see that there was actually more progress with them than just the traditional ways that she'd been going about it. So she kind of tunes in and gives me regular updates on what's working, what's not, how she's kind of re-languaged how she introduces some of the tools. but that they are being well received, and that I think that community, that corporate environment is becoming more open to some of the newer, it's no longer new age, it's current. We have another student who she's a doctor, and she had taken the program simply because she wanted to improve her connection to nature. She just wanted some tools to be able to process some hardships that she was going through personally. And when she started the program, it was, I think, not exactly what she realized she was getting herself into, but by the end of the program, she shared about how expansive she felt, about how her perspective had been completely opened up about the world and about her ability to engage with nature. And then a year later, she sends me a note and says, well, I've decided that I'm not going to be a doctor, and I'm actually going to become a nature-centered coach. So she set out just to learn it without the intention of certifying. And then a year later decided that was actually the path that she was going to go down. So it was a surprise to both her and us, since that wasn't her intention going into it. We have another current student. She hasn't graduated yet. She'll finish in a couple months, and she dove in completely from the very beginning and has already got paid clients, even as a practice coach. And so she's used the tools herself to help and assist her own grieving journey. She lost 3 people in her family in the course of 6 months. And so she dove into the tools. And our students do, as part of learning them, they're experiencing them so they can understand the power. And so when they practice coach each other in class, they're taking their real life and what they're going through to feel that. And so she's gained so much out of receiving the tools that she's now helping others that she knows through their grieving journey. And so she's decided that really is her path, is to help people through the grief. Let's see. We have another student that graduated this past cohort who was a realtor, and she's been using the tools to help people through the buying and selling process, and then just wants it for her family and friends. So I feel like there's a variety of ways that our students have decided to integrate it into their lives, whether as a profession or just to help themselves personally or to help themselves in their other profession. And it's been pretty fantastic to see the many ways that it's been able to expand their lives.
And just listening to those stories, I'm sure that's like just beyond your dreams, coming back from the walk with your dog and finding your bird, and then just to being able to kind of recount all those stories. Once you step into something, then it gets a life and attraction and a force of its own. And just in a way, hearing those different ways that coaching can serve in so many ways, and for me, that's part of the beauty and the magic of coaching. It is just so diverse and so varied, and you don't have to be this is my business. It's a skill that you can bring to life and just use in so many different ways.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I loved your piece about the corporate world, and often that we have our own beliefs around how things are going to be received. And I know for me, just taking my practice outdoors, I had this kind of vision that a corporate coach should be sat down inside and suited and booted and just constrained. And for me, the freedom of stepping outside has been absolutely phenomenal. And I will admit that I live near Glastonbury in southwest England, which definitely has a certain energy and vibe to it, which is it leading towards more the spiritual side of things. And behind my practice, I've done Reiki, I've done EFT, and everything's a blend. I think as you go on your own coaching journey, which you learn so much, and peer coaching conversations can be so powerful during training, and then even just beyond that, as you're continuing your professional development, it's absolutely amazing what can come through. I
think as well, I wanted just to pick up as well with Jen on, and I think it's you touch on a really good subject around it's good for our listeners to hear, is this being courageous and stepping in and suggesting to your client that perhaps we could try this. And And I think people are, you're right, Jen. I think the corporate world and the world of business is becoming more open. I think they are definitely reconnecting and finding, and I would just encourage, as I know you are, be courageous and try something. You'll be constantly surprised about how receptive people become. And I'm really glad you brought that out, and that, the student has stepped into that space. And it could even be as simple as asking them to take their shoes off and stand on the grass. It doesn't have to be complex, and then we could get into some of, as you say, the practices and so on that I think that's a lovely thing you brought out, that I would definitely encourage. Be courageous, try these things, and if you do it with confidence and hold that space, it's going to be okay. How do you feel, Jen? Is that where you're coming from? And
yeah, and it is, we are self-limiting in our fears and insecurities, and if we can set that down for a moment, and we can pick it back up when we're done, if we can set that down for a moment and just invite in versus tell, they're still able to say no, and you can pivot. And so I think it goes towards how it's presented and where your energy is in allowing and accepting that it could go any direction, but I'm going to bring it up and we'll see what happens. And that type of energy behind it is more inviting than we've all experienced someone who is asking a question but doesn't necessarily believe in it in themselves. And so that's a felt thing from everyone when we engage. And so just having that, I'm just going to ask, I'm going to invite, is this something you're willing to play with? And they can say no, and that's okay too. But if they say yes, it could be something really beautiful.
And there's a lightness to that. And sometimes with an invitation, you might have planted a seed. Okay, yeah. It's a no, not now. And actually it's still there. And you never know what may come through in the next conversation or the next because it's there.
I agree with that wholeheartedly.
So looking to the future, where will you be taking? And it's a bit of a two-part to this, for you, your coaching practice, any specific way that you're keen to pursue, and then the center. What plans have you got in store for that? And clearly there's a connection between the two.
Yes. It's so fascinating if I look back across my journey. If I were to look at myself even 6 years ago, there was absolutely a 5-year plan, and this is how we do things, and you set your business up for success, and and that's where my graduate education was all in, how you build a business. And I've actually come to a really beautiful place that completely trusts that all is acting in my favor always, and nature has taught me that, to be present, and that time takes the time that it's going to take, and the step that's in front of you, and just take that step in front of you. So I try to live as presently as possible, and recognize that if I'm aware and I listen, that nudges and the next step will present itself, and then it's just up to me to take that next step. So I try not to get too far into the future with where the business is going. And what that's done for me is it's allowed a lot more opportunity to present itself that I've said yes to, that I probably wouldn't have before because, oh, sorry, that's not on the agenda. And given that this has kind of taken on a life of its own, as you had mentioned, Anna Marie, that it's got its own energy and its own momentum, I feel like I'm really just the facilitator of it. And so it's me listening to what is the business wanting to do, what are the students responding about, and then deciding how to evolve. And so I don't want to speak too much on where I'm going to take it, because I actually don't know where it's going to go, and I'm okay with that. Immediately, it's helping, our current cohort figure out what next steps are for themselves once they graduate, and then starting to connect with those that have already registered for the cohort to come in September, and starting to onboard them and get them set up with everything from logistics to technical stuff. So it's about as far out into the future, and probably not the answer you were looking for.
No agenda at all. It's very much, and I kind of know it's kind of that bit of conundrum as coaches. It's like, okay, so is there that structure? Okay, like 5-year plan, 10-year plan, like go for it. Or is it that kind of more fluid, organic, or how can you maybe play with both? And I, very much hands up, look back, when I came out of the army, if you'd asked what my 15-year plan was, there was absolutely no way that I would have had even the concept of what an outdoor coach or working with nature or having a podcast, having a portfolio lifestyle. It just would not have been a part of my language. I've had to go on the journey to see what comes, and it comes back to this trust, like trusting that things will emerge. The connections and the conversations, if you have that intention and you live by your values and keep moving forwards, then it's been beyond my wildest dreams of what I could even compute. So almost like a goal would be limiting, and I still get that goal setting is an incredibly useful exercise for some.
Absolutely. And I think, Jen, I would add as well, what I'm getting such a great sense of from yourself is this word enabler, collaborator. And it's I guess my question about is, I guess I know the answer because it's a fluid agenda, but are you looking, we talked about these, these modalities, practices, and I guess for you, you're always looking, is there you can add another module, or if something presents itself in the world as being a modality that you would welcome, I guess, are you always looking for the next, what that might be, and adding that to the program?
Absolutely. We've adjusted a few times since we started with our first curriculum, and then recognizing both with student feedback, teachers who decided that they wanted to teach and then something else happened in their personal life and they needed to pivot and redirect. And so looking to fill that. Even as I've just experienced and met other people and go, oh my gosh, that would fit so perfectly right here into the curriculum. Are you open to it? So it's evolved quite a bit since the outset. And then, I've had the students that were with us originally that I've circled back with to do continuing education. Hey, we've added these programs. Are you interested? And it is something that is, I think, its own living thing, that as modalities, as people present themselves, and I just feel and put it through my heart filter, does that feel right? Does that feel connected to the program? And then have that conversation and see where we can fit it in. So it is its own living curriculum.
That's good. Brilliant. Well, our listeners would love to hear and watchers to find out, where do they go to find out more resources or recommend? Is there anything you would signpost them towards, that then maybe they may be interested in some of the work and some of the modalities and the things you're doing? I mean, maybe is there anything like that they could pick up and we could put it on the website and direct them to it?
As far as
resources, it could be books or podcasts, or any things that you have particularly found useful in your journey that you would perhaps signpost them towards.
Yes. Byron Katie's Loving What Is book, that was life-changing for me, and that is what started me on this path, which is one of the tools that we teach. That's the thought work and self-inquiry. It's been transformational for a lot of our students to be exposed to that. In the book itself, she teaches you what the tool is, and then every chapter after that is her facilitating somebody, and it's usually a thought that we all have that we can benefit from seeing how they go through the process. There's a ton of resources on forest bathing, and I feel like it's something that you can just simply experience without necessarily being taught. But if you just want to go out to the forest and tune into each of your senses and do that mindfully and have that as a silent meditation to get out of your minds and into your bodies, and you are your best resource. If you can tune into yourself, and meditation is a great way to do that, but you already hold all the answers that you seek. And so I try not to look too much to external resources to tell us, so that we can start to tune into our own answers and know what our own wisdom is to take that practice forward. Peter Levine's work is great on shaking. David Elliott's work with breath work. He has The Reluctant Healer is his book, and that teaches breath work in that book as well. Bruce Lipton's books. We've got and I'm forgetting, I think it's Biology of Perception is what the curriculum is that we have for that. What else? Hold on. Give me a second, because I know we can edit. I can go through the books that we assign to the students. Hidden Life of Trees by Peter Wohlleben.
Yeah, that's a good one. We've definitely come across that as well. That's a great one.
Biology of Belief, also by Bruce Lipton. Heal Your Body by Louise Hay. Hidden Messages in Water by Masaru Emoto. Are you familiar with that one?
No.
That's interesting.
Oh, it's fascinating. Hold on one second, because I've got it right here. I just used it for a workshop.
Now, we had one of our former guests was talking about blue health. She does a lot of work down on the sea, in that kind of liminal zone. But no, this sounds different.
So his work, and Veda Austin is continuing it, and actually one of our students currently is writing her thesis on it as well. And so water, we imprint on water. Our thoughts, our words, our energy, images are all imprinted on water. And so what he did is, as language was introduced to water, it's going to be hard to show the images here. Because
that's right. We've just got it. There we go. That's it. Perfect. Yeah.
So this is thank you in multiple languages. And then you've got language here, like you fool, hate, you make me sick. So as we use harsh language, negative language, it actually is destructive to the water and how it's created. And then he also plays with different music. Here we go. Mozart.
There we go.
Yes.
Yeah. And just for people listening in who can't see the images, for the ones that are really positive, it's almost like the images are like beautiful snowflakes. That's what's kind of coming to mind. And then for the ones that are kind of harsh and cruel, they're really disruptive and very varied and jagged and holes in them. So it's taking it down to a totally different kind of biological level.
Yes. And Veda Austin, who has continued his work, and you can follow her on Instagram. What she's learned is she'll take a petri dish with a little bit of water, and she'll place it either on an object or on a photograph. And then she leaves it there for a few minutes and then freezes it. And then when she pulls it back out, it has recreated in the crystallized frozen structure the exact mirror of whatever it was connected to. And so, we dive into what it means to imprint on water, and then therefore, how do we engage with water, being that we're mostly water ourselves. And so as we ingest it, as we engage with it, can you speak loving words into the water before you take a sip? Can you make sure you keep it in a container that you want that imprint of what that is, glass versus plastic? And so, one example of resources. I mean, we have so many. Every class has a different book.
Wow.
Yes.
That is singularly one of the most comprehensive answers I think we've ever had to that question. That was phenomenal. Thank you, and we'll make sure we share some of that on the website and for the podcast. That's thank you. That was really great. Yeah,
and it just really highlights the freedom of exploration that you have within this area, and how, you know, what are you curious about? Lean into that, and then actually how can you then bring that back into your coaching practice for being in service with your clients. Yeah. And it's almost just getting the rule book of, I don't know, coaching that was maybe ordained in a certain way back in the like 80s or 90s, and, you know, appreciating it for what it was, because that's what we've got our foundations. But actually there's so much more of where coaching could go in the future, and I think that's we're living in a really exciting time. And it's ultimately like the work you're doing, and, you know, if you're listening in, the work that you have ahead of you, wherever that may take you, that is going to really pave the way for change. And our planet, our population is in so much need of support in so many different ways, that there is space for everybody to do this work in the way that you feel you are in service and alliance with your purpose on this planet, ultimately.
100%.
Oh, what a treat, Jen. Thank you so much. Wrapping up, where can our listeners find out about your work and get in touch if they want to find out more? Because I really feel that this is a bit of an iceberg with like tiny little tip, and there's just so much more.
Indeed. You can find more information about our program or reach out to me through naturecenteredcoaching.com. You can sign up for our blog and newsletter. We send a newsletter out once a month. We blog once a month, and it's really tips on how to connect with nature and connect with your own true nature through nature. You can also follow us on social media, and our Instagram is at naturecenteredcoaching. And the best email to reach us at is support@naturecenteredcoaching.com. Thank
you so much for that. And I'm sure there will be people reaching out to discover more. And a big thank you once again for coming on board. And before we go, just, I mean, clearly everyone who's been watching has been able to see this beautiful picture behind you, but for people who are listening in, what is the image?
It's a canoe ride that I took through the McCall River in San Ignacio, Belize. And it was just so serene because the water was so still as you're just slowly gliding down for 7 miles, and you're looking at the rainforest on either side, and iguanas sunbathing up in the treetops, and howler monkeys jumping around, and the birds gliding along fishing. So it was a really peaceful moment that I captured. I love doing nature photography as a hobby. And so I keep this as a desktop, and I, put out a calendar for my clients every year. And so this just happens to be one of the images that I use because it pulls in so many of the elements, and I find peace in it.
And I do. And I really love that idea of a calendar to share the images. And it's a case of we may be indoors, but actually there's the outdoors, and there's the memory of it, and that in itself really can lift. So no, thank you for sharing that with you.
Thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure getting to know you and having the opportunity to share about what we're doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. And thank you for everybody listening in. I'm sure this has been a extremely informative journey for you. And feel free to go back and listen again, grab a notepad and pen, and the resources will all be up on the website as well. And clearly this is one interview of many. If you've not dipped into our other amazing guests, do take a journey back in time and dip into the kaleidoscope of other coach practitioners, so that you can use their knowledge and wisdom and experience to ultimately deepen your practice. That is what this Passion podcast project is all about. So thank you for taking the time. If you have enjoyed it and you think you know someone who might enjoy it, please recommend. That would be amazing. We are looking to kind of expand and spread the word, and that recommendation would be really, really kind. So thank you for that. Absolute pleasure. Look forward to hearing your thoughts on LinkedIn. and enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are in the world.
So if you enjoyed what you've heard,
Like it
share across your network.
and subscribe to our YouTube channel and LinkedIn community page, the Coaching Outdoor Podcast.
Thanks so much in advance for your support.